Hey everybody, welcome to the Children's Sermon. Just reading the Jesus Storybook Bible. Running out of stories that I can read to you, but here's one that we haven't read yet. It's called The Warrior Leader. It's about a guy named Joshua. And you might not know Joshua, but I bet you know the guy that came before him. The guy that came before him was Moses. And so Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. We talked about that. And then Moses led them through the wilderness. And then eventually Moses led them right up to the promised land. And then Moses died and went to go be with God. And Joshua's the one that God chose to take over and be the leader. And so the story today is about one of Joshua's greatest victories. It's about the Battle of Jericho. And it's a really cool story, as you're about to see. There's all sorts of twists and turns and strange things that are happening, and then the unexpected happens, and then, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. How about this? Let's listen to the story. We'll meet back here in just a minute. Here we go.
The Warrior Leader. After Moses died, God gave his people a new leader. His name was Joshua, which means the Lord saves. Joshua is going to lead God's people into the special land God had promised to give them. By this time, God's people had been wandering around in the baking desert for 40 years. So you can imagine how sick they were of sand and anything yellow and tense and walking and being hot. And how happy they were to reach the edge of the desert and to see their beautiful new home right there in front of them, all cool and green and lovely. There was only one problem. Jericho. Jericho was a city, but it wasn't just any old city. It was a fortress, and it stopped anyone from getting into the land. The people looked at Jericho, at the big, giant, scary walls all around it, at the tall, towering ramparts, at the heavy iron gates bolted shut, at each other. What would they do? No one knew, but God knew, and God told Joshua what to do. But Joshua must have looked surprised because it was a very old battle plan indeed, as you'll soon find out. Then God made his people a promise. I will always be with you, and I will never, ever leave you. If you do what I say, your lives in the new land will be happy and everything will go well. So Joshua gathered his army together. They had their swords and spears and shields. They were ready to fight. But the plan wasn't about fighting. It was about trusting and doing what God said. Joshua's army went marching around the city day after day after day. They're too scared to fight, the people in Jericho said. But they were wrong. God's people weren't scared. They were waiting for God to tell them what to do next. On the seventh day, God told his people to march around the city not once, but 7 times. Then God told everyone to make as much noise as they could. Has anyone ever told you to make as much noise as you possibly can? Well, imagine that noise. Add 39,999 other people making that noise too, and you get the idea. Ear-splitting. And as it turned out, stone-splitting too. Because the huge, strong walls of Jericho just crumbled to the ground, as if they were made of sand. Jericho vanished in a great cloud of dust. So it was that God's people entered their new home, and they didn't have to fight to get in. They only had to walk. Joshua said, God has brought you safely here. Now, will you do what God says? Everyone said, we promise. Only God can make your heart happy, Joshua said. So don't pray to pretend gods. No, they said, never. I'm afraid they didn't keep their promise. They didn't do what God said, and many years later, just as God warned them, things would go badly for God's people. They would lose their home. Enemies would capture them and take them off as slaves, and God's people would scatter into many different lands. But God's plan was still working. One day, God would give his people another leader and another home. But this home, no one could ever take away from them.
So this story has a song that goes with it. I know you're excited. We haven't sung a song ever before on a children's sermon, but there's a first time for everything. You ready for this? This will help you remember this story always. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, and the walls came a-tumbling down. Welcome back. Wasn't that a great story? They walked around that city 7 times, and then eventually the walls came tumbling down. Sometimes I'll go out on a walk just while I'm here at work at Bethany, and I'll joke to the people inside, and I'll say, I'm going to go walk around the church 7 times to see if the walls fall down. Don't worry, they haven't fallen down yet, but they did for Joshua and the Israelites when they were at Jericho, because that's what God told them would happen. They followed God's commands, and they were given a new home to live in. And what I love about that story is how unexpected everything is. And then I even like the way they talk about it at the end, about how Joshua gave them all these instructions from God about don't talk to other gods, don't pray to other gods. And it says, they promised that they wouldn't do it, but they failed. But then it said that God still had a plan to give all those people a forever home. And so this is what I'm thinking about this week, about all the ways that God does the unexpected, and about how God's plan can still happen even when we mess it up or make a mistake. So here's your homework for this week. We got to put our faith into practice, right? That's what we do here during the children's sermons, is we put our faith into practice. And so here's what I want for you. Take time this week to think about the future. Think about 1 year from now. What do you hope God is going to do in your life or for your family or for your friends? 1 year from today, what are you going to be thankful for because God did it? Here's why we're doing it like that. Is because, as this story reminds us, God has a plan. And so we can have hope that God's plan is going to be for something really good for us and our loved ones. Maybe it won't be exactly what you hoped for. Maybe it won't work out the way you thought. But I think there's something important about us looking towards the future with hope in our hearts. Thinking expectantly about the ways that God is going to take care of us and watch over us. So that's your homework for this week. Think about what you want to be what you will be thankful for in 1 year. I'm Pastor Nate. This is the Children's Sermon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.